Hello my beautiful people, welcome back for another little chat. And as I've mentioned, I absolutely love being able to sit down and have yarns on longer formatted content. Creating shorter format is always fun for like shits and giggles, but it's also really nice to have the opportunity to sit down and have like a real yarn with you fellas. And I think this topic in particular is just one of those topics that I need to sit down and I need to talk, and that is my decision to homeschool my daughter. So guys, we're gonna get stuck into this. I am gonna do like different parts, so I am gonna call this part 1 or series 1 because there are going to be many different working elements. And I don't want to also think that I don't want you guys to think that this is going to be like a long-winded yarn. I want to be really short, clear and precise with this conversation because I feel like so many other parents right now are kind of flip-flopping with this, and I was definitely one of those. But I wanted to talk to you about some of the reasons why I have just flat out said I'm going to homeschool my daughter throughout the whole of primary and probably even high school, especially high school. Let's get into it. So if you don't know, my daughter Emily sustained a traumatic brain injury at 1 year of age, of which she nearly lost her life. As a result, 6 years later, she has intensive rehabilitation supports, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, physiotherapist. We see a pediatrician. She also has a whole bunch of like a neuro team that support her at Westmead Children's Hospital, and they have done so since the incident. And we're really blessed that Emily has had early intervention really early on, straight in and very consistent throughout her life. This has been something for me as a mother that I have always prioritized. It is not easy, it is really strenuous, it is exhausting, it is draining, managing my life, my work commitments, my entire week around her needs and her essential supports. But in saying that, guys, we're so blessed to live in a metropolitan place such as Sydney to get her these supports, and importantly me as her mother learn the knowledge that is required and bring that into our home. Now I thought I would create a separate video sitting down and yarning to you guys about the actual supports that she gets, the ways that they helped, how I've navigated NDIS, how I've navigated working with different therapists or even just doctors or specialists. But this video is talking about my decision to homeschool Emily. So we went through kindergarten, and like most people that have traumatic brain injuries, there is a lot of stigma around this type of injury. There unfortunately is not a lot known in the medical world, and a lot of even psychologists or teachers, people in society in general, don't know a lot about traumatic brain injuries. And as a result, there's like a stigma almost applied. And I feel like when Emily went to school, she was almost lumped into the special needs category. And I feel like if you have a child that has a special need or additional need, I'm using special need because that's the language that they use, but my language is always additional needs. I feel like the children kind of get lumped together. I feel like the way that they're treated, they're kind of shifted through a system of forms. And this is no at all talking negatively about her school. There are aspects that I do want to talk about her school that I had problems with, but that's for another video. This is talking about the system of education in Australia, and I feel like they're just lumped in together. I feel like the specific needs of that child cannot be met because teachers and staff are so overwhelmed. They're so drained. They're so exhausted. Teachers are so undervalued in our society. They're so underpaid. And with the increase of people becoming aware of things like neurodivergency, but also importantly trauma, I feel like so many children are being exposed to a variety of different trauma within their homes, and teachers don't have the skill set or the supports or the infrastructure to be able to support and guide and give care to children that do have that trauma, who may need extra help, who may have different learning styles, or who, like my daughter, who may have something like a traumatic brain injury. And this is not to insult teachers. This is simply to talk about the industry and the ways that our society completely devalues the necessity of teachers, and unfortunately the way that that impacts children and their experience in education. So Emily in kindergarten went really well. She was able to adjust socially and make a lot of friends, and I'm really blessed and I'm really lucky that that is something that she can do. She has really welcoming and loving heart, and she's so friendly, but she did have to learn to pull back a little bit. So if kids communicate that they don't want to play, her understanding that they're setting their boundaries, they're communicating their needs. This is something that Emily is continuously working on, learning to understand boundaries and, you know, kids communication. Also, Emily and our family is like really loving, and a way in Aboriginal culture that you show respect is like a hug or a kiss for older people as well, like our aunties. And I think Emily was always hugging these kids because that's what we do with her cousins. So in also in preschool, but in particular at school, we really had to learn that that was not on. And yeah, keeping distance, also again social cues. So we worked through those things, and now she's in year 1, and she's doing really well. Also with Emily's, so Emily is impacted cognitively, so her mind and her function, but she's also impacted with her mobility, and those two really interlink in really unique ways, and ways that I'm lucky enough to understand and learn and formulate as her mum. So for example, Emily's reading and her writing, so she may be able to read the word, but her memory may have difficulty, and she may take more time to be able to remember a word. And then writing, she may struggle with if it's something strenuous, or if it's at the end of the day, or if she's becoming distracted, her actual mobility to use her hand is impacted because she has a traumatic brain injury. Her cognitive function from her mind, knowing the word, and then actually into her hand to writing it, can be disrupted a lot easier. And that has been a big thing with Emily. And if you've ever walked into a year 1 room or a kindergarten room, it is pure chaos. Like, it is pure chaos on a hot day, on a sidewalk, hot cement. It is just roadworks. It is crazy. It is crazy. So many little people, one big person, so many distractions, so much happening. Boo, this, that, bell, boo, blip, bat. It's so much going on. So I think for any child, it is hard to adjust in that environment, but particularly when you do have things that impact you, it's going to be even harder to apply yourself. So I want to explain, guys, that the fact that my daughter has a traumatic brain injury or additional needs is a large determining factor, but arguably the lack of support that teachers have. If my daughter did not have this traumatic brain injury, I would also be genuinely concerned for her capacity to learn in an environment like this. Now, another element I want to talk about, guys, is the actual curriculum. So I think the Australian curriculum is really outdated, and I think a lot of people agree. I feel like the Australian curriculum is really outdated. I feel like the teaching styles are really outdated. I think the fact that different knowledges and different ways that children obtain knowledge, I think the ways that children are actually viewed in this Western model is really outdated. Now we know from a lot of exploration of Indigenous knowledges and the ways that children are viewed as human beings with needs and wants, and they have every right to communicate. Like, for example, Emily would lay down during story time in kindergarten, and she didn't sit up and listen to the story, and her teacher was getting annoyed. I was happy with that. I didn't have a problem with my daughter during story time wanting to lay down. She was visualizing the story, she was soaking the story, and she was listening to the words and reimagining it. But her teacher communicated to me that she was becoming like distracted during story time, and I'm like, you can't say that. You don't know if she's becoming distracted, when in reality she might be staring at a blank wall, actually listening to the words and reimagining them in her mind. So it's like little things like that. And again, the westernization of learning that I've had really key concerns with. The curriculum, I believe, is outdated. I don't think that knowledge is disseminated in a way that is appropriate for children. I don't think that children are being taught to learn, to engage with knowledge. And I feel like a lot of teachers here in Australia are talking about that, how it's just about scores, it's about stats, it's about children becoming these little memory books and just spitting out what they've been taught. I don't necessarily think it's about creativity. I don't think it's about creating human beings that are connected, creating human beings that have a strong core being and identity, or the way they relate to each other in their, childhood. They can't connect to adults in that controlled environment, let alone each other in that controlled way. I also think through things like classism, schools can become really toxic and dangerous. I feel like there's always a sense of elitism, and children pick up this. Children learn, they're sponges, they soak up their parents. And I do believe that in classrooms and playgrounds, children's privileges already start to bubble up. Their judgment on race, and this is the next bit I wanted to talk to. My daughter is black. So my daughter is Aboriginal and her father is West African from Sierra Leone. So my daughter is very black. She's very beautiful. She has an afro. She has brown chocolate skin and big brown eyes. And the racism in this country is so wrought, and I have had such a horrific experience in primary school, and I saw certain things around race bubbling up with my daughter being the only African child in her year. I had concerns with her being the only child with hair texture like hers. Now, these are things that can be remedied with moving to different direction or different locations geographically, and this is something that I did think about. But then you guys have to understand there's always nuance within that. The fact that my daughter is mixed, the fact that my daughter has two different cultures, and two different cultures that have been greatly impacted by colonization, I think is also a really important point. And if you are a caregiver or a parent listening into this, I want you to think about that as well. The way that your child's genetics or history as well will shape the way that they're viewed and treated in their classroom and by their teachers and by staff. I also think children, I spent a lot of time on TikTok. Okay, and I want you guys to listen to some of the testimonies from Australian teachers on TikTok talking about how children with learning delays are seen as problems. Teachers don't want them in their classroom. Teachers are disengaged. Teachers get stroppy, and a lot of teachers are leaving these industries because of the discrimination that children with additional needs are getting, and the mistreatment and the lack of care and the duty of care. Now, in saying that, guys, this has not been the case for my daughter, but in saying that, it has been the case because I don't feel supported in her school by her school with my daughter's additional needs. I don't feel like her school are supporting me as a mum, and if they're not supporting me, they're not going to be supporting my child with her needs, because they're not in contact with me. They're not checking up with what I think's happening. They're not updating me with what's happening. They're not doing any of that. And that was a really big concern to me, the fact that the teachers aren't checking in, or the fact that the school is not checking in. They're not communicating to me what strategies, what they're working with Emily, this, that, or the other. And I think that's a really big red flag, and one that I refuse to turn away from. Quite often when children become disengaged with the education system, you may hear the phrase of falling through the cracks. And I feel like that is already happening with my daughter. I feel like she's already falling through the cracks. I, as an Aboriginal child, was taught to kind of shut up and sit up in the back of the classroom and get out of the way. And that was how I kind of moved through 3 or 4 years of my education. And I don't want that to be the case of my daughter, where she's conformed. She's forced to become this white ideology of what a child is. She's not going to be a neurotypical child, which will be celebrated and coveted. She's the opposite. She learns in different ways. She absorbs information differently. She comes from an Aboriginal household, an Aboriginal family, where her role as a child is in complete opposition to what it is in the white world. What it means to be a child to her classmates who are predominantly white is not the same thing what it means in our household, what it means for her teacher. And I do not want my child to ever be taught or made to feel like she has to shut up or conform, lose her spark, lose her brightness, her identity, her humor, her spark, in order to not disrupt the functionality of a classroom. And I feel like that is already happening. And if you guys can tell, I'm very, very passionate about this. I'm also somebody who has worked with children. So I spent three years of my life working on after school care programs, holiday programs, and as a coordinator, and I learned a lot of this information through working in Redfern and with largely Aboriginal children, the ways that these schools are failing children, yarning to their parents, yarning to the kids, working with a team of volunteers that would come and work with the kids for Homework Centre, learning and discussing with them, but also again my own lived experience and having other cousins, younger cousins and older cousins who have went through these experiences. This knowledge has really shaped my understanding. Now, finally, my daughter is the most important thing to me. Money, jobs, having a perfect life in a perfect apartment, economic prosperity, that shit is nothing compared to the importance of my daughter. And I've made the commitment that the job that I have or the businesses that I'm launching, or even if I have to go and get a job, whatever job I will have, it will enable me to have my daughter at home, to homeschool my child. I am making that commitment with her in year 1 now, because I will never choose economic stability over my daughter's future, over my daughter's growth, development, her knowledge, her learning, her capacity growth, her development, her function, her opportunities. I am never going to let money impact my daughter's future. So I'm choosing to invest in her, and I'm going to create a life that gives me that economic freedom. Do I have that at the moment? There's a man up there in construction. Do I have that at the moment? No, I don't, but that is something that I will be working towards. I'm going to share with you guys lots of updates, the type of curriculum that I want to work with Emily, talking about race, teaching her about Indigenous knowledges, but also that of Africa and West Africa, Sierra Leone, where her father is. I want to teach her about Egyptology, geology, geography. I want to teach all of my daughter these things in a way where she can flourish and grow and learn what her passions are in a way that I didn't and many other young people. Let me know in the comments if you guys would like to hear part 2 around my plans, around how I'm actually going to get this done with like paperwork and applications, but importantly the freedom that comes from being able to create a curriculum and a learning plan for my daughter in a way that is holistic. Alright guys, this is my first video of many. I love you all so much, and I'll check in with you soon. Bye!